Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Of course, it is now only 15 days into the New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's tenure, and he is making moves already. Alex, do you live in the city?
I do. I'm a lifelong New Yorker.
You're a lifelong New Yorker, so you feel it more than I do. I live in the suburbs along with John Tucker. So.
Did you get your free bus service yet?
Not yet. Still waiting for it.
Still waiting. And free childcare?
I don't take the bus that often. Usually the train, so I don't think it'll directly impact me.
Okay.
But still waiting.
Still waiting.
Let's check in with Myles Miller. He is our senior reporter covering security, the national desk, law enforcement, governments, and cities. And it's here where we want to talk to him because Myles is joining us from downtown Manhattan. And Myles, talk to us a little bit about what the new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, is doing when it comes to work. He is cracking down on, some companies and how they're treating workers.
Yeah, he's enlisted Lena Khan as an advisor, unpaid advisor to him, of course, known to the Bloomberg audience as the former FTC chair. In addition to that, Julie Su, who joined us on our fabulous Labor Fridays, right? The Fridays where we get the jobs report. And then in addition to that, Sam Levine, who was at the FTC running enforcement. That's his dream team. And what they're doing is going after companies that are involved in delivery, that are involved in the gig economy to make sure that workers are protected. The story that crossed the Bloomberg terminal just about 20 minutes ago is one that really they're suing food delivery providers for what they say is withholding pay from workers. And it really gets to the heart of what the Mamdani administration is going to be about, using little-known laws to go after big companies to fight for who they say is the little guy. The company that is being sued today is MotoClick, and the allegations are pretty simple, that they violated delivery worker laws by failing to pay the required minimum rate and deducting canceled and refunded orders directly from their paychecks. And these are folks who most times are only making, money off of the tips that they're getting from these people who are ordering food.
Wait, you mentioned the company that is in question here is MotoClick. This is not a company that I think a lot of people are necessarily familiar with. If you order from DoorDash or Grubhub, you don't necessarily have a direct interaction with MotoClick, do you?
Right. This is one of those companies that says it works with platforms like Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub. You may file your order through these companies, and then you don't know that the folks who are coming to deliver it are actually working with this, in some cases, last mile company. They are basically integrated into the point of sale systems at some of these restaurants. And so, you may order from Uber or Lyft, but you don't know that, Uber or DoorDash or Grubhub, but you don't understand, in that last mile where it's coming from. Well, the city's putting them on notice that, that they're going to be sued for this. And then in addition to that, the city passed laws in the last year or so that protects these workers. In addition to this lawsuit, they're also putting the delivery companies on notice that there are specific laws that protect workers as it relates to deliveries, making sure that they get proper wages, minimum wage, and all of that. And if that's not followed, that they could meet the same fate that's being met by MotoClick right now.
Myles, this, of course, follows the allegations that DoorDash and Uber deprived New York City delivery workers of more than $550 million in tips. That is a lot of money. Is there a sense, if this lawsuit is successful, that they might see those wages come back?
Yeah, I think what the city wants to do, and specifically the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection wants to do, is in filing any of these lawsuits or in making these claims public, is to put pressure on these companies to do the right thing before they get to the enforcement level. We've seen a lot of these companies that have been sued in the past, whether in the de Blasio administration, whether being sued by the comptroller's office, come to an agreement on a settlement, and that money does trickle down back to workers. But it doesn't stop with just the city hall. It doesn't stop with the comptroller's office. Just today, the Manhattan DA also, trying to make it clear that he wants protections for these workers, because these are, these wage cases continue to pop up. It was just about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that Grimaldi's Pizza was being accused of wage theft and holding back pay for these low-paid workers, and that's going to be a major focus of this administration.
So can you reconcile this first action? It's kind of like a shot across the bow by the Mamdani administration with the promises it had made to its supporters, to voters, to folks in the city like Alex Semenova, who's a lifelong New Yorker. Is this kind of what they promised to prioritize?
Yeah, I mean, they have changed the role that Julie Su is in. It used to be the deputy mayor for economic development, but it's not just economic development. It's really with a focus on worker protection. It's really on a focus on equality and rights for people. And this is a person who has spent a good amount of time in Washington, has spent time in California, who is going to be leading this effort. When you look at Lina Khan being involved in decision making here at City Hall and going and doing what she knows best, right? Going through very complex parts of the city charter to find where you can really stick it to companies, or where they can stick it to companies. It really shows that this is a top priority for him. And in addition to that, this role, the role in consumer protection, was one of the first roles he filled after being elected, and right before right after he took office, because he knew it was going to be something that people really relate to.
Myles, when was the last time that we saw a New York City mayor go after big companies like this? Is this unusual?
No, I mean, I think in the de Blasio administration, we saw companies targeted, certainly. And then, in the Adams administration, it was certainly a very pro-business administration, trying to work with business, but also sort of trying to put the onus on businesses to do the right thing. And so this is obviously a different tactic. And I think for the first time, you're seeing an administration where they're not taking people really from big business and saying, okay, here's how you can work on economic development. In the de Blasio administration, Alicia Glenn was the deputy mayor for economic development and had come from the business community. No, these are people who've worked in government for some time and are trying to figure out a way to make government work for people who, don't have much money, or to hit at the affordability crisis. It's really a first of its kind approach to doing this kind of work.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Intelligence coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us live on YouTube.
Let's move over to the tech sector, because there's some big news for the AI sector, given that Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, a partner of NVIDIA and other chip makers, came out with a monster forecast. Mandeep Singh is our global tech research head at Bloomberg Intelligence, and he joins us now. And TSMC is a bellwether for the AI story, and the revenue forecast it has given is growth of almost 30%, handily beating analyst estimates.
Well, I mean, right now we are in an environment where the supply constraints are at the component level, at the fab level. I mean, TSMC called out how advanced nodes are almost 77% of their revenue. So that just goes to show that if they have more wafer capacity at the advanced node level, they'll probably be, growing even faster. And that's why they raise their own CapEx. Mm-hmm. So think of the trickle-down effect. Hyperscalers are raising their CapEx. TSMC, being the fab player, is raising their CapEx. And this is the entire supply chain that everyone realizes they need more data center capacity when it comes to running AI. And all the way through the supply chain right now, it's trickling down. Now, the question is obviously of overbuild and if and when, we'll hit an equilibrium. And from what we have seen in terms of partnerships and deal making, like OpenAI, Cerebras, I mean, right now they're trying to procure as much chip capacity as they can because, I mean, OpenAI has said their revenue growth is a function of the power and chip availability, compute availability they have. So right now, last year they grew their power and chip compute availability 3x. Their revenue grew 3x. So that's the kind of part of the cycle we are in. And the question is, how long it's going to sustain. And so far, this signs are this is going to carry through at least through 2026.
Mandeep, what does the strong outlook from TSMC mean for Intel and its foundry business? Intel is up some 30% this year. Is it a positive sign for them that demand is there, or a sign that TSMC is a dominant name here?
Actually, there was some demand spillover to an Intel and Samsung, especially on the non-data center side. So I mentioned TSMC is heavily skewed towards advanced nodes and more towards data centers. Well, there is demand for, chip capacity on the PC side, smartphone side. And that's where there is some spillover that's carrying over to an Intel on the PC side, to Samsung as well. And so right now, everyone seems to be benefiting from overall chip demand, across the board.
Right. And something else that's in demand is memory. And we've seen Micron, we've seen SanDisk, we've seen Western Digital really benefit from that demand for memory chips. But it also, there's a downside to that because you have hardware companies as a result under pressure because they need to pay for that memory and they need to go out and source it. And it's not always available.
Unless you are Jensen and NVIDIA, who has really managed the supply chain well. I mean, I was amazed how NVIDIA mentioned that they still feel comfortable holding on to that mid 70% gross margins. Mm-hmm. They're one of the biggest users of HBM memory that is supply constrained right now, and the prices are going through the roof. But they have locked in those multi-year agreements where the suppliers can't really raise prices. And so from that perspective, the bigger you are, if you're an Apple, I'm sure they can source their memory. They may have to pay higher prices and it will impact their gross margins, but not to the same extent. It's going to hit a smaller hardware vendor. And that's what I think we'll find out this earnings season.
Mandeep, also looking at the story today about Oracle struggling to hire workers for the build out of its headquarters in Nashville. What has this AI build out meant for hiring, the talent war? Is there anyone who's winning it?
Yeah, I mean, we read the story on the terminal about electricians, having almost a doubling of their pay. And so anyone who is linked to that data center construction right now is in high demand. And so it doesn't surprise me that you are sort of in this environment where labor is in short supply, components are in short supply, and putting all these things together is taking longer time because everyone wants them to be ready overnight. Mm-hmm. Well, that's where you're running into these bottlenecks.
Well, to Alex's point, Oracle is trying to attract workers to Nashville, where it's developing this riverfront headquarters. Yeah. Is that a place where the tech talent will flock to?
I mean, we've seen what has happened in Texas, right? In terms of companies going to Texas just because it's easier to set up data centers over there. So
and no income tax.
No income tax. That's right. All these pockets, I think, are having their moment in terms of one, attracting these big companies. And if you have power, and I haven't studied Nashville in that detail, but if you have power, then it suddenly becomes a very attractive destination.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Intelligence coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
One of the tailwinds for the market heading into this year was the expectation of a spate of deal making. And to that point, we did learn today that Boston Scientific is looking to buy Penumbra for about $14.5 billion. Obviously, with the big banks reporting earnings, bank executives are also making comments. David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, says that we are not yet in the middle of a full-on M&A cycle, and he sees a very, very good year for M&A overall. Let's bring in Jennifer Rhee. She is our senior litigation analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence to talk to us about the antitrust landscape. Is there an active antitrust monitoring happening right now? Because this administration has signaled that it wants to see deals being made.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly is a big change from the Biden administration, where we kind of had the opposite sentiment. I mean, we are really seeing very little activity from the Department of Justice, a little bit more from the Federal Trade Commission. But even in their case, it's been pretty restrained. And it seems that both authorities are really willing to work with the companies if they think that there's a problem with the deal, to work out some kind of settlement. And that's what didn't exist during the Biden administration, and why deal making was so stymied at that time. And I think most companies see, if we have a problem, a lot of deals don't, but if we do and we can come up with a solution, we can probably get it cleared.
Jen, you mentioned muted activity from the regulators, but are there any industries that they're targeting right now more than others?
Well, it looks like it. It's interesting that we see Boston Scientific has a deal because of the few challenges that have been brought to deals by the FTC. They've been in the healthcare space. One in the housing area, construction adhesives, which is a recent case they filed, but two in the healthcare space. And it doesn't surprise me, really, because these are very sensitive sectors, consumer-facing sectors, and that does align with essentially a populist agenda, which they talked about in the beginning when they took on their positions. And so I think we'll probably see, if we see continued activity in those areas or other very sensitive consumer areas.
The other thing that we need to keep in mind is most of these companies that we're talking about are big multinationals. They operate all around the world. Mm-hmm. So you have U.S. regulators, and they may be stepping back and letting things happen, but regulators in Europe may not be. Mm-hmm. And I bring this up because we heard reports yesterday that Paramount and Netflix have been meeting with European Commission officials as part of their bid for Warner Brothers. What compare and contrast, for instance, the European Commission regulators with those in the U.S.?
You know, there's been a little bit of a pullback. I think when I think of really big regulators in antitrust, I think of U.S., China, UK, and Europe. Right? Mm-hmm. These are the jurisdictions which would be willing to actually block a global deal. And we've seen a little bit of pullback across the board, and not so much with China. It's really just a black box there. I can't speak to what they're doing. But in the UK and in Europe, there has also been a bit of a pullback, especially in the UK, after they kind of got really chided from Microsoft Activision and trying to step in there. The thing is, for companies doing a deal that might have scrutiny in Europe, it's a bit scarier than in the U.S. because they have the ability under their law to actually block a deal, whereas the U.S. regulators don't. They have to go to court, right? And they have to win in court in order to actually block a deal. It is far more difficult for them. It is easier in the EU. And Netflix, by the way, is gigantic. I didn't know this till I started looking at the deal, but it's really, really big outside the U.S. And HBO is getting bigger. In many of the countries in Europe. It's recently expanded in Italy and 7 or 8 other countries. So they will, that deal, I think no matter which company ends up buying Warner Brothers, is going to get a lot of scrutiny, and certainly scrutiny in the EU. And that is going to be one area where they're going to have to work, I think, to get clearance.
Jen, the past couple of years saw a lot of high-profile antitrust cases, specifically within big tech. We had rulings against Google and Meta. What kind of precedent have they set for big tech regulation in 2026?
Well, what they're showing is that it's going to be very, very difficult for U.S. antitrust agencies to actually tame what they view as monopolistic conduct. I mean, they did win technically against Google with respect to monopolizing search, but the remedy was fairly weak. They didn't get what they were looking for. Look at what Google's doing now with AI, with Apple, which is exactly what the plaintiffs were trying to avoid, dominance in AI after dominance in search. So the difficulty they have is even where they win on liability, they have a really tough time with remedies. Most U.S. federal judges are going to be very cautious when it comes to meddling in business and the way a sector may develop, especially in technology, because it's so rapidly changing and nobody knows where it's going. So where you have these cautious judges, you're just not going to get the drastic remedies that are probably the remedies that are needed to really do something about the market positions of some of these companies. So we're seeing that it's going to be difficult. But what we haven't seen is much of a let up on the cases that were inherited from the Biden administration. This DOJ and FTC are continuing to go after these cases in court. They're continuing to pursue what you might think of as a drastic remedy, a structural remedy. The next test will be Live Nation, which is going to trial March 2nd against the DOJ and some states.
Okay, so we'll watch for that, and it's a bit of leftover from the previous administration. Right. We talk about regulators, and that's usually how the antitrust enforcement shows up, or any kind of pushback from government authorities. But there's also the role of President Trump as well. And he's made clear that because he has some firm opinions about certain companies and certain sectors, that he's going to be, what he says, personally involved in some of them.
That's right.
Is there a playbook for this? I mean, how do regulators work in concert with a mercurial president?
You know, there really isn't a playbook. This is somewhat unprecedented. Now, there are many that would argue that this kind of started during the Biden administration, but we have authorities at the Federal Trade Commission and Department of Justice that are very much trying to align what they're doing in the antitrust space with the policy priorities of this administration, I think much more so than in the past. And they just don't look like they'd be willing to buck the White House if the White House has some feel or something, you know, an issue with the deal, right? So we're seeing a lot of alignment. And we're also seeing a lot of
preemptive alignment, even.
Yes, preemptive alignment. And we're seeing a lot of lobbying, which we hadn't seen before, too, and the overruling of the antitrust division by senior officials who are talking to lobbyists. And so there is a lot of concern right now in the antitrust community about the rule of lobbying really prevailing over the rule of law when it comes to merger enforcement.
And this is stuff that we see after the fact, you know, after an announcement has made, as opposed to during it.
That's right. We see reports. And of course, I'm not privy to what's going on behind closed doors, but there has been a lot of news reporting, and a former senior FTC official who recently left, who's spoken out about some of the activities related to the Hewlett-Packard Juniper deal. Now, most recently, we have a deal between two huge real estate brokerages, Compass and Anywhere, that was cleared very quickly without even a deep investigation by the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice, that surprised a lot of people. I think it even surprised the companies that had projected to close much later this year. And apparently that was also because lobbyists had stepped in.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Intelligence coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us live on YouTube.
We need to talk about AI, not so much so far as to how it's impacting the stock market, because we've seen that and we see that today, but how companies are actually integrating it and how consumers are experiencing it. Lindsay Dutch is our Bloomberg Intelligence Consumer Hardlines Senior Analyst, and she's been researching this idea of retailers embracing AI, but I guess there's a recognition, Lindsay, that for impulse purchases, which are so critical for the industry, you still need a human touch. So it can't be done remotely. It can't be done virtually. It's usually done in person, and it's kind of unpredictable.
Yes, hi, Scarlet. Thanks so much for having me. I just returned from the NRF conference, 40,000 people there, lots of retailer leaders there. You know, AI was all the buzz. It was pretty much the topic of every session. And as I think about it, there's a lot of really cool technology going into this. And retailers are mostly using AI to improve employee productivity, move employees up the value chain, improve operational efficiency. And on the customer side, we're mostly seeing it in terms of like a customer service chatbot, maybe some personalization when you look at your email ads. But there's, new levels that are coming that will really, amp up, AI's place in that retail shopping journey. But as you mentioned, I think, that spur of the moment, that spontaneity, when you find something that you love and you have to buy it, that's a big piece of the shopping and retail world. And that really still, you need some human element in that process.
Lindsay, we talk often about the death of brick and mortar stores. People aren't going into physical stores as much as they are shopping online. Do you think that AI can reignite the excitement for going into a store and experiencing the technology?
So I actually think we're already seeing a return to brick and mortar. Coming out of the pandemic, people realized how important it is to have an in-person experience. More recently, I've heard comments, I follow Best Buy, they have talked about that Gen Z and younger shoppers are showing a much stronger preference to shop in the store, to talk to their Geek Squad, to get advice, to browse things in person. We also see that from an Ulta Beauty as well. So I do think e-commerce penetration will continue to rise as a whole. I think these new technologies will continue to support more shopping online. But I do think there is a personal element that will remain. And we see strong brick and mortar demand on the retail real estate side, and that is expected to continue for some time.
Having said all that, how does AI enhance the ability for stores to be able to reach out to consumers so that they are there and have the right recommendations when consumers are in the mood to make impulse purchases?
Yeah, so right now, I think the best consumer-facing use of AI is really increasing discovery, exactly what you're saying. So being able to serve up product online when a customer is looking for it. And this new tool that Google co-developed with Walmart and others, Universal Commerce Protocol, is going to do just that. So you can pop into this tool, which is powered by Gemini, and you can say, I'm looking for a navy blue blazer that I don't want to have dry cleaned. And it will serve up, the product from the brand. You can transact right there, so it's all seamless. Something like that, is a great tool to bring product directly to the person and close the gap between looking for something that you want, finding it, and transacting it. And we see a lot of technology, coming to the fore that's going to allow that to happen.
Lindsay, AI and new technology can be really complicated for consumers to navigate. What are companies doing to help guide shoppers through maximizing the experience they get with AI?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think that, people in generally are using more tools like Gemini, for all sorts of things, ChatGPT, that will, increase that comfort level. And we have seen over time, I also cover home furnishings, in the beginning when people were starting to transact online, like no one wanted to buy a couch or a big product like that you would typically want to sit on and feel. And, that over time, retailers have figured out how to showcase their product in a digital way that makes customers more comfortable transacting on a big ticket item like that you would normally really want to see in person. And I think the same thing would be true for these other new technologies. It will take time, adoption will rise, it will rise slowly. And that's why I think it's a real balance. You have to be, in that tech world, but you also have to be in person.
Well said. What surprised you the most, Lindsay, very quickly at NRF 2026 when you went there? What kind of blew you away?
I think the retail environment right now has in 2025 was an extremely challenging environment, and I think what's most impressive is, the people in the industry are just so excited to take on new challenges in 2026. Even though we're still battling costs from tariffs, trying to implement all this technology, a difficult consumer backdrop. So there's just a lot of excitement in the industry, and everyone is just so excited to rise to that next new challenge. And I love that energy.
This is the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.